Okay, here's another example of a median, and this is appropriate, you know, we can talk about tornadoes, and since we had an outbreak of tornadoes yesterday or early this morning, this is appropriate data. So this tells us that the number of tornadoes that occurred in the United States over an 8-year period, and they want us to find the median. So this is kind of simple. So we take all this data, and basically I'm just going to count it. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's an even number. So it tells me that there's not going to be a value that's going to be right in the middle that I can just pull out and say this is my median. I'm going to have to do that little trick that I talked about. So I'm going to take 764 and I'm going to add 856, because right in the middle, that's what breaks this data into two equal halves. And when we start talking about box plots, I've got some good videos on that. And that's going to be kind of like the next homework. We're going to be able to find, break data up into what we call quadrants, Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4. So basically what we're doing here is we're splitting the data into two equal parts. So 50% of all the data is going to be on the right of the mean, or the median, and 50% of the data is going to be on the left of the median. So the median splits the data into two equal parts, and it's going to be right here. So I'm going to take 764 and I'm going to add 856 to it, just like I did in the example here, and I get a value of 1620. I'm going to divide that by 2 because I've got two data points right there. I'm trying to find that middle value, which is 810. So 810 is going to be my median. That's going to be the middle value, and that's just an easy way to find that. The mode's easy as well. It's the value that occurs most often in a data set, period. So if you find numbers, and a lot of students go, well, there's 2 or 3 numbers that occur most often and they're all equal. Well, then you can have 2 means, or 2 modes, and you can have 3 modes. Usually what we call a data set that has 1 mode is a unimodal data set or distribution. And if it's got 2 distinct modes, it's called a bimodal distribution, and if it has more than 2, then we call that a multimodal distribution. And here we go, unimodal, bimodal, and multimodal. That just means 1, 2, or more than 2. Pretty easy stuff. And like I say, you have these so you can kind of go over this stuff. And here's an example. It wants us to find the signing bonuses for NFL players for a specific year. The bonuses are in millions of dollars, must be nice. So it wants us to find the mode here. So you may find it easier to sort the data. Yeah, I do that all the time. And as you can see, they sorted the data from low to high, which is what I do as well. So we can see that 10 occurs 3 times, and there's no other value here that occurs 3 times. So 10 would be our mode. So it occurs more often than any other number in the data set. So 10 would be our mode. So $10 million is the mode. Again, like I say, it must be nice. Oh, we got mode. More modes here in nuclear reactors. That's funny because I've been watching a thing on HBO called Chernobyl, and it's talking about a nuclear reactor that blows up. So yeah, more appropriate data here. So I've got licensed nuclear reactors in the United States over a 15-year period. Find the mode. Well, I'm going to look for a number that occurs more often than any other number. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 109s, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 104s. So I've got a bimodal distribution in this particular example. So I've got 2 modes. The modes are 104 and 109. Pretty easy to identify that. So let's go back to, whoops, I'm going the wrong way, I think. Maybe not. Runners per week. Find the modal class. Oh, this is talking about classes. So this is pretty easy too, because it's going to look at the frequency. So those classes that we talked about, we've got classes, and then we can say, what is the modal class? It's going to be the class that, has the highest frequency. And you may have bimodal frequencies, you may have multimodal frequencies. So it is the number that occurs most often. Okay, what else we have here? Modes, more modes. Nuclear reactors. I did that already, didn't I? I did. Boat registrations. Again, it says data shown for the number of boats registered for 6 years or 6 counties in southwestern Pennsylvania. And it says find the mode. Well, the mode's going to be the highest frequency, so it's going to be Westmoreland. So that's going to be pretty easy to identify. Since the category with the highest frequency is Westmoreland, the most typical class is Westmoreland. So it's going to be the class with the highest frequency. That's going to be your mode. So if you don't have a distinct number, you can just look at the frequency here. Boom, that's going to tell you the mode. The mid-range. So with the range, remember what we did with that to find our class, our number of classes. What we do is we take the highest number and subtract the lowest number. Well, with the mid-range, we're going to take the lowest number and we're going to add the highest number to it, and we're going to divide by 2. So that's going to be the mid-range. It's a little better, I'd say, indicator of like a central tendency than the range is. The range is not a good, it's not a real good predictor of what the true average is. Sometimes we want to use a mid-range, but the range is necessary for some calculations like the class size, and when we get into box plots, we'll have to use the range again. But this is how we do the mid-range. Pretty easy stuff. So bank failures, the number of bank failures for the most recent 5-year period. The mid-range, of course, we're going to take the low number, we're going to multiply the high number, and we're going to divide that by 2, and we get a mid-range that is equal to 80. And it's kind of like a central tendency. It kind of shows you what the middle of the distribution is. However, there's better measures for that. The weighted mean. This is kind of like your GPA, because what weighted mean is since you have things like GPA, and it's going to be based on like class points. You know, an A is worth more than a C, so it has more weight to it. It has more value. So now when we calculate these things, I have to take that weight into consideration. So finding the weighted mean of a variable by multiplying each value by its corresponding weight, then dividing it by the sum of the products by the sum of the weights. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to some folks. Here is the formula for this. Let's make sense of it now. Let's talk about GPA. So here we go. Now we can put this into a little table. So we've got students who are taking English composition, intro to psychology, that's one of my favorites, biology, and then physical education. So the credits, or the weight, is going to be, let's say that I've got, you know, these 3 hours. So there's 3 of these credits that are offered. And looks like biology, there's probably a lab with that one, so there's 4 credits in that. And physical education is 2. So what happens here, here's the grades, and an A is worth 4 points. A C is worth 2 points, a B is worth 3 points, and a D is worth 1 point, and F is worth 0 points. So try not to make any F's because zeros do not average well at all. So what we do with this formula is we're going to add all the weights of each X. So what we do, we're going to multiply that up. We're going to sum them. So 3 times 4. So 3 is how many credits there are. And they're worth 4 points. So we're going to multiply these across credits and the grade. So 3 times 4 plus 3 times 2 plus 4 times 3 plus 2 times 1. So we're just going to 3 times 4, 3 times 2, 4 times 3, and 2 times 1. And then we're going to add that all up. So a lot of times you'll see a little dot right there between the W and the X, and that just tells you that that needs to be multiplied. When I give you something, I'll usually put a little dot there that tells you that you have to multiply that. So we're going to, there's a dot right there. So we're going to multiply all those things, and we're going to add them up, and that's going to come up to 32, and we're going to divide that by the weight. 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 2 is on our denominator, which equals 12, because this is telling us to add. And now I've got a weighted mean, I should have another bar on it, of 2.7. So this particular student's GPA is 2.7. Even though they made an A, but you know, this is what's bringing them down, is this, the C and the D. So 2.7, it's okay, but it's not great.